My name is Martha. I'm 62 years old, and my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, fractured my wrist over a few credit card bills. But it was the text message my son sent me moments later as I sat alone in the emergency room that truly broke me. It's a story I've kept locked away, but I feel it's time to share it. Sometimes sharing our deepest wounds is the only way to let the light in. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're all reading this from and what time it is in your part of the world. It makes me feel a little less alone knowing we're all connected, even across the miles. The scent of roasting chicken and rosemary usually filled me with a sense of peace. It was the smell of family, of Sundays, of love made tangible. That particular afternoon, however, as I stood in my son Daniel's gleaming, oversized kitchen, the familiar aroma was mixing with the sour smell of impending dread. I was at their house, the beautiful two-story colonial they'd been so proud of, the one I'd poured a significant portion of my retirement savings into for the down payment, a fact that felt like a chain around my neck than a gift from the heart. I'd arrived an hour earlier, humming a tune from the radio, carefully balancing my famous apple crumble, still warm from the oven and dusted with just the right amount of cinnamon. Daniel had greeted me at the door with a quick, distracted hug. "Hey, Mom, smells great. Rebecca's just finishing up a work call in her office." He had taken the dessert and disappeared, leaving me standing alone in the foyer. While I waited, I drifted into the kitchen, a habit ingrained in me after a lifetime of caregiving, first as a nurse for 40 years, then as a single mother. The house was immaculate, almost sterile, a testament to Rebecca's obsession with appearances. Not a cushion was out of place, not a fingerprint marred the stainless steel appliances. It was a house from a magazine, not a home where people actually lived. As I went to toss a crumpled napkin into the trash bin tucked inside a sleek cabinet, my eyes snagged on something. It was the corner of a credit card statement, a bright, angry red logo from a high-end department store I knew I couldn't afford even on my best day. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but concern is a mother's curse. I told myself I was just tidying, but my hand moved on its own, pulling the paper from amongst the coffee grounds and vegetable peels. The balance printed at the bottom of the page made my breath hitch. $9,427. My heart started a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Another one was underneath it, from a different national bank with a balance just as staggering. A third was for a travel company showing charges for a resort in the Caribbean I knew they hadn't visited. My son Daniel wasn't a man of high finance. He was a high school history teacher, a good one, passionate and dedicated, but his salary was modest, a fact I knew all too well. Rebecca was a marketing consultant, and while she presented an image of immense success, these numbers felt impossible. This wasn't just frivolous spending. This was a five-alarm financial fire. A cold knot of fear, icy and familiar, formed in my stomach. This was the kind of secret debt that destroyed families. It had destroyed mine once before. When Daniel finally ambled back into the kitchen looking for a snack, I tried to keep my voice even, to quell the tremor of panic. I'd raised him alone since his father, a man who could charm anyone but couldn't outrun his gambling debts, had walked on us when Daniel was 10. I knew his every fear, every insecurity. His biggest one was failure, especially when it came to money. His own father had left us with nothing but a mountain of debt and a legacy of broken promises. I had worked double shifts for years, meticulously rebuilding our lives, vowing my son would never know that kind of instability. "Honey," I began, holding up the crumpled statements, "is everything all right with the finances? I just happened to see these in the trash." Daniel's face went from pale to ashen in a heartbeat. He couldn't meet my eyes, his gaze darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "It's fine, Mom. Really, Rebecca's got it all under control. She's expecting a big promotion soon. A huge one. The evasion was a punch to the gut. I knew that look. It was the same haunted, cornered look his father used to get right before everything fell apart. Just then, Rebecca swept into the room, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and sharp angles. She ended her call with a syrupy, sweet, "Talk soon, darling," before her eyes, as sharp as a hawk's, landed on the statements in my hand. Her smile vanished, replaced by a glacial coldness. She'd clearly heard my question. "Is there a problem, Martha?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. "I was just concerned, Rebecca," I said, trying to project calm. "These bills, it's a lot of debt for a young couple." "What business is it of yours?" she snapped, her voice losing its silken edge. She strode across the kitchen, snatching the papers from my grasp. "Are you snooping through our trash now? What's next? Our mail? Our bank accounts?" "Of course not. It was right on top. Rebecca, this is reckless. I'm worried about Daniel, about both of you. This is how people lose their homes." "Oh, you're worried," she sneered, her voice rising with contempt. "You think we can't handle our own lives? You think we need you to come in and save the day, just like you always have? Well, we don't. This is handled." I looked at Daniel, my heart pleading with him. "Say something! Defend me! Tell her I'm your mother, not an intruder. Be a man." He just stood there, rooted to the spot, looking like a scared little boy caught in the crossfire between his mother and the schoolyard bully. "This isn't about me, Rebecca," I said, turning back to her, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "This is about responsibility. I helped you get this house. My name is on that mortgage. I have a stake in this too." That was the wrong thing to say. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Her face, usually a mask of calculated beauty, contorted into something ugly and furious. "A stake? You hold that over our heads every single chance you get? You think your money buys you a seat at the head of our table? This is my house, my life." She took a final menacing step forward, invading my personal space. I could smell the faint scent of wine on her breath. "I think it's time for you to leave." "I'm not leaving until I have an honest conversation with my son." "I said," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous, her eyes glittering with malice, "get out." And then it happened. It wasn't a slap, which would have been shocking enough. It was a full-bodied shove. Her hands, strong and wiry, slammed into my chest, hard. I was 62, and while I was healthy, I was not prepared for the force of it, the sheer venom behind it. My feet tangled in the legs of a kitchen stool, my balance and my world evaporated. The world tilted sideways in a dizzying, terrifying blur of stainless steel and polished granite. A sickening crack echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the kitchen. It was a sound I knew intimately from my decades as a nurse, the sound of bone breaking. A wave of white-hot, nauseating pain shot up from my wrist, stealing my breath and bringing tears to my eyes. I crumpled to the cold tile floor, cradling my arm, the beautiful scent of roasting chicken now seeming like a cruel, mocking joke. Through a haze of pain and shock, I looked up. Rebecca stood over me, her chest heaving, her expression not one of horror or regret, but of cold, hard triumph. She hadn't just pushed me, she had won. She didn't offer a hand, she didn't call for help. She simply smoothed down her silk blouse, turned on her heel, and walked away as if I were a piece of trash she had just swept off the floor. My eyes darted to the doorway. Daniel stood there, a statue carved from fear. His face was ashen, his mouth slightly agape. He saw my arm, twisted at an unnatural angle. He saw the tears of pain welling in my eyes. He saw what his wife had done. And he did nothing. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He just watched as his mother lay broken on the floor of his kitchen. In that moment, The physical pain in my wrist was nothing. It was a dull, distant throb compared to the sharp, shattering agony in my heart. My son, my boy, he wasn't coming to help me. He had made his choice. Getting up from that floor was one of the hardest things I've ever done, both physically and emotionally. Every instinct screamed at me to stay down, to wait for the son I had raised to snap out of his paralytic trance and rush to my side. The little boy who used to run to me with every scraped knee, the teenager I'd coached through his first heartbreak, the young man I'd proudly watched walk across the stage to receive his college diploma. Surely that person was still in there somewhere. But the silence in that house was a living thing, a suffocating blanket of betrayal that told me he was gone. With my good hand, I used a kitchen chair to haul myself up, my teeth gritted against the grinding, sickening pain in my wrist. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I leaned against the counter to steady myself. I didn't look toward the doorway again. I couldn't bear to see his face, to see the confirmation of his cowardice. Wordlessly, my movements stiff and clumsy, I gathered my purse and my car keys from the counter where I'd left them. I left the apple crumble, my peace offering, to grow cold on the gleaming granite. It was a symbol of a relationship that had just died. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red traffic lights and hot, angry tears. The pain was a roaring fire in my arm, but it was my son's face, frozen in indecision, that was seared into my mind's eye. How could he, after everything, after all the bedtime stories, the parent-teacher conferences I attended alone, the double shifts I'd worked as a nurse to make sure he had everything he needed for his college fund? Had it all meant nothing? Had I raised a man or just a shadow who attached themselves to whoever seemed stronger? In the sterile, impersonal waiting room of the Northwood General Emergency Department, I sat under the buzzing fluorescent lights, a number on a check-in sheet. I felt invisible, just another elderly woman who'd had a fall. The shame of admitting my son's wife had assaulted me while he stood by and watched was a bitter pill I couldn't swallow. So I lied. I tripped in the kitchen, I told the triage nurse, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. A kind but weary-looking doctor finally saw me. The X-ray confirmed it, a clean fracture of the distal radius. A clean fracture from a fall. As he was fitting me with a temporary cast, a heavy, clumsy shell of plaster and gauze, my phone buzzed in my purse. My heart gave a foolish, traitorous leap of hope. Daniel! Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe Rebecca's fury had passed and he was finally free to act like my son. Maybe this was the call where he would say, "Mom, I'm so sorry, I'm on my way." I fumbled to get the phone out with my one good hand, my fingers clumsy and uncooperative. The screen lit up with his name. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. My hands trembled as I opened it, my breath held tight in my chest. The message wasn't an apology. It wasn't a question about my well-being. It was 5 soul-crushing words that would be etched onto my heart forever. Please don't come back. It's better this way. I read it once, then twice. The letters swam before my eyes. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp, as if I'd been punched. The doctor was saying something about follow-up appointments and pain management, but his voice sounded like it was coming from the other end of a long, dark tunnel. Please don't come back. He wasn't just siding with her. He was erasing me. He was casting me out. After she had physically broken a bone in my body, he was delivering the final emotional blow that shattered my spirit. I felt a coldness spread through me that had nothing to do with the shock of the injury. It was the cold of absolute disillusionment. I don't remember leaving the hospital. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, the engine off, the new, heavy cast on my arm, a stark white symbol of my new reality. The dam broke. Sobs racked my body, raw and ugly sounds of a heart breaking for the son I had just lost. When the tears finally subsided, leaving me hollowed out, exhausted and empty, I knew I couldn't sit there alone. There was only one person in the world I could call. Carol. My friend for over 40 years. We met as rookie nurses, fresh-faced and full of ideals. We'd seen each other through marriages, childbirth, my own messy divorce, and the quiet grief of my husband's funeral years later. She knew my story better than anyone. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Martha, is everything okay?" My voice was a hoarse whisper. "Carol, can you talk?" "Of course. What's wrong? You sound awful." And so the story tumbled out of me. The bills, the confrontation, the shove, the sickening crack of bone, and worst of all, the text message. I read it out loud to her, and the words felt like poison on my tongue, a curse I was speaking into the world. There was a long, charged silence on the other end of the line, and when Carol finally spoke, her voice was low and tight with a fury that I was too broken to feel myself. That little witch! I never trusted her. And Daniel, oh, Martha, I am so, so sorry. "What do I do, Carol?" I whispered, the questioning hanging in the air like a prayer. "He's my son, my only son. He's a grown man who just watched his mother get assaulted and then told her to get lost," she said, her voice firm, pulling no punches. That was Carol, always practical, always clear-eyed, the best friend a woman could ask for. "First thing tomorrow, I want you to go to your own doctor. Get this documented properly, and you keep that text message. Don't you dare delete it. That's evidence." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay." "And Martha," she hesitated for a moment, "this is going to sound cold, but you need to start thinking strategically. You said you helped them with the house?"
"I co-signed the mortgage," I said, the memory making me feel sick with regret. "Gave them a huge chunk of my retirement for the down payment. Daniel said they couldn't have gotten the loan without my signature. My credit and my capital were the foundation of the whole deal." Another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her sharp, intelligent mind. "Interesting," she said slowly. "Listen, this might be nothing, but my daughter, Susan, you know she works in banking, right? She is an underwriter at Northwood Mutual." My breath caught. "The same bank that holds their mortgage?" I whispered, my heart starting to beat a little faster, a tiny flicker of something other than pain. "Exactly," Carol said. "I'm not promising anything, but let me make a call. Not as your friend, but as a concerned mother who just heard a very disturbing story. Let me just ask a few general, hypothetical questions about how these things work. Is that okay?" A tiny spark ignited in the cold, dead ashes of my heart. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't revenge. But it was something. It was a hand reaching out in the darkness, offering not just comfort, but a potential weapon. "Yes, Carol," I said, my voice a little stronger now. "That's okay." I slept in fits and starts that night, my arm throbbing in its cast, my son's cruel words echoing in the hollow chambers of my mind. Each time I drifted off, I saw his face in the doorway, passive, afraid, and absent. I woke up feeling older, as if the night had stolen years from me, leaving behind an ache that no amount of pain medication could touch. The morning light felt harsh, intrusive. My cozy little house, usually my sanctuary, felt like a cage filled with ghosts of a happier past. I made coffee with one hand, the simple task now clumsy and frustrating, a constant reminder of my new vulnerability. I looked at the cast on my arm. It was a badge of my own foolishness, a monument to a mother's blind love. I had given everything to my son, And in return, he stood by and watched his wife break me, then swept the pieces out the door. I was drowning in a sea of self-pity and grief when the phone rang, startling me so much I nearly dropped my mug. It was Carol. "Morning, sunshine," she said, her voice brisk, but I could hear the underlying warmth and concern. "How's the arm?" "It hurts," I said honestly, "but not as much as everything else." "I know, honey, I know, but listen, I have some information for you. I spoke to Susan. I was very careful, just asked some hypothetical questions about co-signed loans with large down payments from the co-signer. It turns out an application like that, especially one with a few, let's call them red flags in one of the primary borrower's credit histories, goes through several layers of verification." My coffee cup clattered in its saucer. My hand was shaking. "Red flags? What do you mean?" Susan couldn't give me specifics, of course, but she said it's not uncommon for one partner to have a much spottier history than the other. In those cases, the co-signer's flawless record is what gets the loan approved. But it also means the final underwriting is more meticulous. And here's the kicker, Martha. The final sign-off for their loan is still pending. "Pending?" I repeated, my mind struggling to catch up. "But they've been in the house for 2 months. They've unpacked everything." "They're in, but the bank hasn't fully finalized and signed off on the back end. According to Susan, the very last step is a final verification call. It's a formality, usually, a recorded call to the primary borrower and the co-signer to confirm all the details on the application are true and correct before the file is officially closed and archived." I held my breath, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat. A call to the co-signer? A call to me? "That's the one," Carol confirmed. She said given the file status, that call should be scheduled for sometime in the next 48 hours. "Martha, this is your window." The air in my kitchen suddenly felt electric. A window. Not a door kicked open by rage, but a small, legitimate, legally sound window of opportunity opened by the carelessness of my enemies and the fierce loyalty of my friend. "What can I do?" I asked, my mind racing, possibilities blooming in the barren landscape of my despair. "You can tell the truth," Carol said simply. "When they call, you don't have to be emotional. You just have to be a prudent investor of your own money. You can inform them that based on new information that has recently come to light, you are no longer confident in the financial disclosures made by the primary borrowers, and you must therefore withdraw your support for the application." Susan said that would be like pulling the pin on a grenade. The whole deal would collapse. They would never be able to re-qualify on Daniel's teacher salary alone, not for that house. I sank into a kitchen chair, my head spinning. It was audacious. It was terrifying. And it was perfect. It wasn't an act of petty revenge. It was a prudent financial decision. I was protecting myself, my assets, my future from people who had proven themselves to be reckless, violent, and untrustworthy. I would be using their own system, their own rules against them. For the rest of the day, I wasn't a victim. I was a strategist. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but now it was overlaid with a cold, clear purpose. I didn't cry. I made a list. I scheduled an appointment with my own doctor, just as Carol had advised. I took a picture of my cast and the ugly purple and blue bruises that were starting to bloom on my chest from the shove. I saved the picture of Daniel's text message to a secure folder in my email. I was gathering my ammunition. I spent the afternoon preparing my statement for the bank. I wrote it down on a yellow legal pad, rehearsed it out loud, making sure my voice would be calm, firm, and professional. I was no longer just Martha, the heartbroken mother. I was Martha Colson, a retired registered nurse, a property owner, and a co-signer on a $750,000 loan who had a fiduciary duty to herself. The call came the next morning from a blocked number. My heart leapt into my throat. Mrs. Martha Coulson, a polite, businesslike voice asked. This is she. This is David from the underwriting department at Northwood Mutual Bank. This is a recorded line. I'm calling to conduct the final verification for mortgage application number 77B415 for the property at 124 Willow Creek Lane. You are listed as co-signer for the primary borrowers, Daniel and Rebecca Coulson. Do you confirm this? I took a deep, steadying breath. I pictured Daniel's face in the doorway. I felt the phantom pain in my heart from his text message. Yes, that is correct. Great. I just have a few standard questions. Do you confirm that all the information provided in the initial application, to the best of your knowledge, is true and accurate? This was it, the moment of truth, the point of no return. Actually, no, I cannot confirm that. Since signing the initial documents, information has come to my attention that leads me to believe there have been significant and material misrepresentations regarding the primary borrower's financial stability and outstanding debts. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of typing. I'm sorry? Misrepresentations? He stammered.
Therefore, I continued, pressing my advantage, my voice gaining strength, effective immediately, I am officially withdrawing my co-signature and my financial support from this mortgage application. Please note this in the file. I will be sending a certified letter to the same effect to your legal department. But, Mrs. Coulson, the loan has already been funded. The borrowers are in the property. Then I suggest you consult your legal team, I said, a sliver of steel in my voice I hadn't known I possessed, because I will not be financially tethered to individuals who have engaged in deceit and who represent an unacceptable level of risk. Thank you for your time. And with that, I ended the call. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, my hands still on the phone. My heart was still pounding, but for the first time in 48 hours, it wasn't from fear or grief. It was from the exhilarating, terrifying thrill of taking back control. I had pulled the pin. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. The silence that followed my call to the bank was heavier and more charged than the silence in Daniel's kitchen. It was the quiet of a storm gathering just over the horizon, the deep breath before the plunge. I knew I hadn't just pulled a pin, I'd lit a fuse on a very expensive bomb, and I had no idea how long that fuse was. For 2 days, I heard nothing. The quiet was unnerving. I went to my doctor, got my cast checked, and let him document the fall with a professional objectivity that felt both reassuring and deeply dishonest. The lie sat like a stone in my stomach, but the truth was a story I wasn't ready to tell the world. Not yet. It felt too private, too shameful. I tried to keep busy. I rearranged my bookshelves with one hand, a ridiculously difficult task that at least occupied my mind and my body. I called Carol and updated her. "You are my hero," she said, her voice full of admiration. "Don't you for a second feel guilty. They did this, not you." But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a general waiting for the enemy's response, my stomach in a constant churning knot of anxiety and anticipation. Every time a car drove down my street, I tensed, expecting them to appear. The first volley came on the 3rd day. My phone rang, and the screen lit up with Daniel's name. My finger hovered over the screen. A part of me, the foolish, stubborn mother's heart that refused to die, wanted to answer, to hear his voice, to hope for an apology. But the other part, the part that now wore a heavy plaster cast, knew better. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. And again. 4 times in 10 minutes. The sheer panic in the frequency of the calls told me everything I needed to know. Then a new text message notification popped up. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from Rebecca. "What did you do?" Just 4 words, but they were laced with the venom and panic of a cornered snake. They knew. The grenade had gone off in their perfect, magazine-worthy house. I looked at the message, and a cold, grim satisfaction spread through me. It wasn't joy. It was the feeling of justice, long delayed. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, the dismissive, soul-crushing text from my own son. I typed a reply, my thumb moving deliberately across the screen. You made a mistake. Now you're going to learn what it costs. I hit send. The sense of power was intoxicating, a potent antidote to the helplessness I had felt for days. Then Daniel's voicemail notification dinged. Against my better judgment, I listened to it. His voice was a frantic, panicked babble, almost unrecognizable. Mom, pick up the phone. The bank called. They're revoking the mortgage. They said you withdrew your support. What does that even mean? They're talking about default, about foreclosure. The lawyer from the bank was using words I don't even understand. Mom, you have to fix this. Call me back. There was no, are you okay? No, how's your arm? No hint of remorse. Just panic. Just money. Just the house. It confirmed everything I had feared. My son, the man I had raised to be kind and thoughtful, had been completely hollowed out and replaced by this desperate, grasping stranger whose only concern was his own comfort. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. The real confrontation came that evening. I was just sitting down with a cup of chamomile tea, trying to calm my frayed nerves, when a car screeched to a halt in my driveway. Headlights swept across my living room window, stark and accusatory. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to the door, my heart pounding a steady, defiant rhythm. I opened it before they had a chance to knock. They stood on my porch, illuminated by the yellow light, a portrait of desperation. Daniel looked like a wreck. His hair disheveled, his eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen since he was a child afraid of the dark. Rebecca, on the other hand, had composed herself. She wore a mask of strained politeness, a wolf trying to disguise itself in sheep's clothing. "Martha," she began, her voice sickeningly sweet, as if we were discussing the weather, "there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding with the bank." "There's been no misunderstanding, Rebecca," I said calmly, my body blocking the doorway. "I made my position very clear to them." "You can't do this," Daniel burst out, stepping forward, his voice cracking. "This is our home. You're destroying our lives." "You're destroying your lives?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I looked directly at him, into the eyes of the boy I had raised, and for the first time, he actually flinched. He actually took a step back. Was I the one who racked up tens of thousands of dollars in secret debt? Was I the one who assaulted your mother in her own son's kitchen? Was I the one who told her to never come back after she lay injured on the floor? Tell me, Daniel, who is destroying whom? He fell silent, his face paling, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Rebecca saw she was losing control of him. She immediately switched tactics, her eyes filling with crocodile tears. She reached out and took Daniel's hand, placing it dramatically on her stomach. "Martha, please," she whispered, her voice breaking with theatrical emotion. "I haven't told you yet because it's so early. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the cool night air between us, a perfectly crafted, emotionally manipulative bomb. I'm pregnant. It was a masterstroke, and I had to give her a grudging respect for the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it. The ultimate trump card, the one thing designed to melt any grandmother's heart and override all logic, all anger, all sense. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, one hand protectively, possessively on her perfectly flat stomach, the other clutching Daniel's hand as if he were her lifeline. Daniel, for his part, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His expression was a comical mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, idiotic hope. He looked from Rebecca's face to her stomach, and then to me, a silent, desperate appeal in his eyes. "See, Mom? Everything is different now. There's a baby, a grandchild." He was already picturing it, a magical solution that would wipe the slate clean. But I wasn't a sentimental fool. I was a nurse. I had spent 40 years observing people, reading the subtle cues of the human body and detecting lies, from patients trying to hide a symptom to family members trying to cover up abuse.
and every single thing about Rebecca's performance, from her word choice to her body language, screamed fraud.
My mind flashed back to my suspicions from the kitchen, the way she moved with a sharp, angular grace, not the subtle, cautious movements of a newly pregnant woman. I remembered the wine glass I'd seen her holding in a social media picture from just last weekend's party, held aloft in a toast. And now, this. The overly dramatic announcement, timed perfectly for maximum emotional impact, delivered on my doorstep under duress. It was all too perfect, too clean, too much like a scene from a bad soap opera. I held her gaze, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. "Pregnant," I said, my voice flat, betraying none of the raging suspicion inside me. "That's wonderful news. When are you due?" The direct question, a simple request for a detail she hadn't prepared, made her falter for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted to the side before meeting mine again. "Oh, it's very early," she stammered, recovering quickly. "The doctor said we shouldn't even be telling people yet, but with all this stress, I had to, for the baby's sake." "I see," I said coolly. "Well, in that case, you certainly shouldn't be dealing with this drama. The first trimester is a delicate time. You and Daniel should go home and rest. We can discuss this when everyone is calmer." I made a move to close the door, a clear dismissal. "No!" Daniel cried out, finding his voice, galvanized by the thought of his unborn child. "Mom, you don't understand. A baby changes everything. You can't let your grandchild be homeless. You have to call the bank back. You have to fix this. For the baby. Think of the custody arrangements. Think of its future." He was completely hooked, swallowing the lie whole. He saw the baby not just as a child, but as his salvation, the magical key that would reopen my heart and my wallet. I looked at my son, at the desperation etched on his face, and my heart ached. Not for him, but for the intelligent, thoughtful boy he used to be. Rebecca had hollowed him out and filled the empty space with her own toxic ambitions and cheap deceptions. "Daniel," I said, my voice softening just a little, trying to reach the man buried underneath the fear. "A baby doesn't change what happened in your kitchen. It doesn't erase the text you sent me, and it doesn't pay off your credit card bills." "But it's a baby, Mom." I turned my attention back to Rebecca. She was watching me, her eyes narrowed, realizing her grand performance wasn't having the desired effect. The desperate, pleading mother-to-be was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating adversary. "I'll make you a deal, Rebecca," I said, my voice low and even. "You want me to call the bank? Fine, I will. I will consider it. On one condition." Hope, raw and greedy, flickered in her eyes. "Anything," she breathed. "I want a sincere apology, right here, right now. I want you to look me in the eye and apologize for assaulting me." Daniel looked at Rebecca expectantly, relief washing over his face. This was it, a simple path to fixing everything. Just say sorry, a few simple words. Rebecca's jaw tightened. The mask of the gentle, expectant mother slipped entirely, revealing the cold fury beneath. Apologizing was not in her nature. It meant admitting fault, ceding power. But she was trapped, and she knew it. She forced a tight, artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," she said through gritted teeth. "You're right. I was under a lot of stress. I overreacted. I am very, very sorry that you tripped and fell." "Tripped and fell?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. I let the words hang in the air between us. "That's your apology." "I'm sorry, your wrist was broken," she amended, her voice rising with frustration, the facade cracking. "What more do you want me to say?" "I want you to say, 'I'm sorry I pushed you, Martha.' 3 simple words. The truth." She stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure that it was almost beautiful. She couldn't do it. The lie was too essential to her being. Admitting the truth would be to admit she wasn't the victim, that she was the aggressor, the villain. And in Rebecca's world, she was always the hero of her own twisted story. That was all the confirmation I needed. My last doubt vanished. I stepped back inside my house and walked over to the fireplace, where a neat stack of kindling and newspaper lay waiting for the first cool evening of autumn. I picked up a book of matches from the mantelpiece. Daniel and Rebecca watched me, confused, from the doorway, their faces pale in the dim light. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had advised me to keep copies of all my original mortgage documents. I had the thick sheaf of papers right there on my desk, a monument to my misplaced trust. I picked them up. "You know, Daniel," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room, each word chosen with care, "I needed you once. I needed my son on the night his mother was assaulted in his home. You weren't there. You chose to be silent." I struck a match. The sulphurous flare filled the room, casting flickering, demonic shadows on my face. "You made your choice," I said, holding the papers over the fireplace, and I dropped the documents into the hearth. The paper curled instantly, the edges blackening, and then it burst into a brilliant, cleansing orange flame. The symbol of their dream house, the dream I had funded, the dream that was built on a foundation of my sacrifice and their deceit, was turning to ash before their very eyes. The look on their faces, the shock, the disbelief, the pure, unadulterated horror was a sight I would never forget. I said, "Go home," I said quietly, without looking at them again, my eyes fixed on the fire. "There's nothing more to talk about." I heard a strangled cry from Rebecca and the sound of them stumbling away from my door like frightened animals. I stood there, watching the last of the papers burn, the smoke rising up the chimney and disappearing into the night sky. I had burned the bridge. There was no going back now. The week after I burned the mortgage papers was one of eerie, unsettling quiet. I expected frantic calls, angry texts, another dramatic confrontation on my porch. But there was nothing. It was the silence of an enemy regrouping, licking its wounds and plotting its next move. It put me on edge more than their shouting would. I used the time to solidify my defenses. I had a long meeting with my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a shrewd, silver-haired man who had handled my late husband's estate and my own will. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a rock of calm, strategic thinking. "You burned the papers was a bit theatrical, Martha," he said with the ghost of a smile after I recounted the event. "But it certainly sent an unambiguous message. Now, let's talk substance." We went over everything, step by step. The assault, the text message, the call to the bank. He was meticulous, taking detailed notes. He then brought up the trust fund I had established years ago. It was a substantial fund, containing the bulk of my late husband's inheritance, which I had carefully managed and grown over the years. It was intended for my first grandchild, a legacy of love and security. "Given the current situation," Mr. Harrison advised, his fingertips steepled in a thoughtful pyramid, "I suggest we put a temporary freeze on this trust. We can draft a notice. It will prevent any attempts by Rebecca to make a premature claim or use it as leverage in any potential legal action. It's a simple protective measure. It was a relief to be proactive, to build a fortress around what was mine, what was sacred, what she would undoubtedly see as her next target." My life fell into a new, strange routine. Physical therapy to regain strength and flexibility in my wrist, long walks with Carol, where we talked about everything and nothing, sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every scene, every word. The question of Rebecca's pregnancy gnawed at me. My gut, my nurse's intuition, screamed that it was a lie. But how could I prove it? I felt like I was in a chess match, but my opponent's queen was invisible, able to move anywhere on the board without being seen. The breakthrough, when it came, was from the most unexpected quarter imaginable. It was a Tuesday night. I was watching some mindless television, trying to numb my racing thoughts, when my phone buzzed with a notification from a social media app. A message request from a name I vaguely recognized,
Rachel Stevens. A quick search of Rebecca's profile confirmed it. It was her younger sister. My first instinct was to delete it without opening it. She was from the enemy camp. It had to be a trap, a new line of attack. But curiosity and a sliver of desperation made me tap the screen. The message was short, hesitant. Mrs. Coulson, my name is Rachel, Rebecca's sister. I know this is completely out of the blue, and you have absolutely no reason to trust me, but I can't stand by and watch what my sister is doing to you and your son. What she's doing is wrong. My heart started to pound, a heavy, hopeful rhythm. I typed back a cautious one-word reply. Hello. The 3 little dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. I could sense her hesitation, her fear, even through the screen. Finally, a new message popped up. The baby. It's not real. She's not pregnant. The air left my lungs in a rush. To see it there, in black and white, from her own sister, it was a moment of pure, stunning vindication. How do you know? I typed, my fingers trembling so much I had to correct 2 typos. Because she told me. She's been lying to Daniel for weeks, trying to trap him because she knew he was getting ready to leave her after she lost her job. The whole thing was a scheme. The big promotion she told your son about, also a lie. She was laid off a month ago for poor performance. The credit card debt is from trying to keep up appearances. Laid off. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening finality. The desperation, the volatility, the extreme violent reaction to my questions about money. It all made sense now. She wasn't just a liar, she was a desperate fraud. She's a pathological liar, Mrs. Coulson, Rachel continued, the words pouring out of her now. She's done things like this our whole lives. She even lied about having a serious illness in high school to get out of finals. My parents enabled her, and now Daniel is doing the same. I'm so sorry, but I can't be a part of it anymore. She's trying to ruin your family, and she's destroying your son. I felt a wave of sympathy for this young woman, caught in the web of her sister's toxicity, trying to do the right thing. Do you have any proof? I asked, my voice a whisper in the silent room. This was the crucial question. Without proof, it was still just my word against hers. Another pause. Then a new message came through. It wasn't text. It was a screenshot of a text conversation. Rachel, Becca, you have to stop this. Lying about a baby is insane, even for you. You're going to destroy that family. Shut up, Rachel. It's working. The old bat is on the ropes, and Daniel is eating out of the palm of my hand. This house is mine. A little white lie is a small price to pay for a $750,000 house. This isn't a white lie. It's fraud. What happens in 9 months when there's no baby? I'll handle that then. Maybe you'll have a convenient miscarriage when the time is right. Now stay out of it, or I'll tell Mom and Dad what you really did with your first semester's tuition money. Blackmail, lies, fraud. It was all there. Undeniable. In writing. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. This was it. This was the invisible queen, revealed. This was the weapon I needed to end the war. Rachel, I typed slowly, my mind a whirlwind. You are a very brave young woman. Thank you. Would you be willing to sign a sworn statement to this effect? My lawyer will ensure you are protected. Yes, came the immediate reply. I will. I saved the screenshots, my heart pounding with a fierce, triumphant energy. My first call was to Mr. Harrison. My second was to Carol. The cold fury that washed over me was absolute and clarifying. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about a house or a lie. This was a violation, a desecration of a memory she had no right to touch. This was the final straw. Rebecca had just made the biggest and last mistake of her life. "It's okay, Daniel," I said, my voice now eerily calm. "I'll handle it." I hung up before he could reply and immediately called Carol. I told her what happened. "That's it," Carol said, her voice like flint. "No more waiting, no more strategy. We're going to the police right now." "No," I said, a plan already forming in my mind, a cold, perfect diamond of a plan. "The police will just file a report. It will get lost in a system. I want the ring back, Carol, and I want to expose her for exactly who she is, in a way she can never deny. We're not going to the police. We're going to set a trap." Mr. Harrison had warned that Rebecca was a cornered animal. Well, I had been a nurse for 40 years. I knew how to handle cornered creatures, and I knew how to set a line and wait for a fish to bite. My plan was simple. Rebecca was desperate for cash. She wouldn't be able to resist pawning the ring, but a unique piece like that would be memorable. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone. With Carol's help, we created a list of every pawn shop, jeweler, and cash for gold establishment within a 50-mile radius. I called each one. I described the ring in perfect detail, the 14-karat gold, the specific cut of the sapphire, the small inscription on the inside, always M&T. I told them my name and number and said, "This ring was stolen from my home. It has immense sentimental value. If a young woman matching this description," and I described Rebecca perfectly, from her designer handbag to the tiny scar above her left eyebrow, "tries to sell it to you, please do not buy it. Detain her if you can, but most importantly, call me immediately. There will be a substantial reward for its safe return, no questions asked." It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack, but it was a more active approach than waiting for the police to act. For 2 days, there was nothing. I started to lose hope. Maybe she'd sold it to a private collector online. Maybe she'd just thrown it in a river out of pure spite. Then, on the 3rd day, my phone rang. The caller ID said Gold and Silver Exchange, a shop about 30 miles away. "Mrs. Coulson?" a man's gruff voice asked. "Yes," I said, jumping to my feet, my heart leaping into my throat. "You the lady with the sapphire ring?" "Yes. Has someone tried to sell it?" "She's here right now," the man said, his voice low. "A real piece of work. Tried to tell me it was her grandmother's. I told her I had to check the stone's authenticity in the back room. She's getting antsy. What do you want me to do?" My heart was jackhammering against my ribs. "Keep her there. Tell her you're waiting for an appraisal from your main office. Tell her anything. I'm on my way. I'm 20 minutes out." I hung up and immediately called Carol. "It's happening. The trap worked. Meet me there and call the police. Tell them a robbery suspect is being detained by a shop owner. Give them the address, but tell them to wait for my signal. I want them there, but I want to be the one to confront her." When I walked into the Gold and Silver Exchange, my heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest. And there she was, Rebecca, pacing impatiently by the counter, checking her phone, the picture of indignant entitlement. She saw me and her face went from irritation to stark, absolute terror. She gasped, "Martha," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Hello, Rebecca. Fancy meeting you here. I believe you have something of mine." The shop owner, a large, burly man with a kind face, emerged from the back room, holding the ring delicately in his palm. He looked at me, and I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He placed it on the glass counter, my ring, safe. Just then, as if on cue, 2 uniformed police officers walked in through the door, alerted by Carol. They stood by the entrance, their presence a silent, overwhelming pressure, cutting off her only escape route. Rebecca looked from the ring to me to the police officers. She was trapped, utterly and completely trapped in a cage of her own making. "You have 2 choices, Rebecca.
I said softly, so only she and the shop owner could hear. "We can do this the hard way, and these nice officers can arrest you for felony theft, or you can come with me to my lawyer's office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to sign some papers. Your choice." Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred, but the fight had gone out of her eyes. She knew she had lost. "Fine," she hissed, the word barely audible. I picked up my ring, its cool metal, a comfort in my palm. I turned and walked out of the shop, not looking back, leaving her to the silent judgment of the police officers. The trap had been sprung. Now it was time for the checkmate. The next morning, the air in Mr. Harrison's conference room was thick with a tension so profound it felt like you could cut it with a knife. It was a beautiful room, all polished mahogany, leather-bound law books, and a panoramic view of the city, but today it felt like a courtroom on Judgment Day. I sat on one side of the long table, feeling surprisingly calm and centered. The storm inside me had passed, leaving a quiet, resolute clarity. Mr. Harrison sat at the head of the table, his face a neutral, professional mask, a sheaf of documents neatly arranged before him. Carol had insisted on coming with me for support, and she sat a little behind me, a silent, formidable guardian. Daniel arrived first, 10 minutes early. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his suit was rumpled, and he wouldn't look at me. He just slumped into a chair on the opposite side of the table, staring at the polished wood grain as if it held the answers to the universe. He looked like a man who had already been sentenced. Rebecca arrived exactly at 10 a.m. She had tried to reclaim her polished facade, dressed in an expensive-looking black suit, her hair perfectly styled, a designer bag clutched in her white-knuckled hand. But she couldn't hide the hunted look in her eyes and the faint, uncontrollable tremor in her hands. She sat next to Daniel, not touching him, the two of them separated by a chasm of their own creation. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, and the sound was like a gavel coming down, calling the proceedings to order. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his calm, authoritative voice filling the room. "We are here today to discuss several serious matters and to propose a final binding resolution. We will proceed in an orderly fashion." He slid a slim folder across the table toward Daniel and Rebecca. "First, let's address the matter of the property at 124 Willow Creek Lane. As you know, the mortgage was revoked due to a material misrepresentation of financial facts and the withdrawal of the cosigner's support. The bank is proceeding with foreclosure. My client, Mrs. Colson, will not be contesting this, nor will she be offering any further financial assistance in this matter."
Second, Mr. Harrison continued, his voice hardening slightly as he picked up a second folder, "we have the matter of theft." He paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy and ugly. "Specifically, the theft of a valuable heirloom ring, which was recovered yesterday at a pawn shop. We have a signed statement from the shop owner, and," he gestured to a large television screen mounted on the wall, "we also have this." He pressed a button on a remote. The screen flickered to life. It showed the grainy but clear footage from the hidden camera in my guest room. It showed Rebecca, her face a mask of greedy concentration, entering the room, going directly to the dresser, opening my jewelry box, and pocketing my ring. The whole act took less than 30 seconds. It was chillingly efficient. A strangled gasp escaped Daniel's lips. He stared at the screen, then at his wife, his face a canvas of dawning horror and disbelief. He had known she took it, but seeing the cold, calculated way she did it was another blow entirely. Rebecca went chalk white. She thought it was her word against mine. She had never imagined I could be so cunning. "We have chosen not to press criminal charges at this time," Mr. Harrison said, clicking off the screen, "pending the outcome of this meeting." The threat was unspoken, but crystal clear. "And third," he said, his voice dropping, becoming graver still, "we have the most serious matter: fraud." He slid a third, thicker folder across the table. This one contained Rachel's signed affidavit. "This is a sworn statement from your sister, Miss Rebecca Stevens," he said, looking directly at Rebecca, using her full maiden name as a subtle jab. "In it, she testifies under penalty of perjury that you were never pregnant, that you were in fact laid off from your job a month prior to the incident, and that the entire story was a fabrication designed to emotionally manipulate and defraud my client and your husband." He then produced the pristine color printouts of the screenshots of the text messages. "We also have your own written confirmation of this fact. I believe the phrase you used was, 'a little white lie is a small price to pay.'" This was the killing blow. Daniel physically recoiled from Rebecca as if she were toxic. He finally looked at her, and the last vestiges of love or loyalty or even pity in his eyes had been replaced by pure, unadulterated disgust. You lied?" he whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of the ultimate betrayal. "All of it? The baby?" Rebecca just stared at the documents, her mask completely shattered. She had nothing left. No lies, no tricks, no escape routes. She was exposed, utterly and completely. Mr. Harrison let the silence stretch for a full minute, allowing the weight of her deception to settle over the room like a shroud. Then he produced the final, magnificent document. "Which brings us," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "to the resolution." He placed the thick, bound document in front of Daniel. The cover page read, "The Colson Family Trust, an instrument of amendment and early disbursement. This is the revised instrument for the trust which was established by your late father and is administered by your mother. It contains the entirety of your inheritance," Mr. Harrison stated. Daniel stared at it, uncomprehending. "Your mother has chosen to make a very generous final offer," Mr. Harrison explained, his tone softening slightly. "She is invoking a clause in the trust that allows for an early disbursement under special extenuating circumstances. This document, what we are calling the living will, outlines the terms." He tapped the first page. "It is, in essence, a choice. Your choice, Daniel." He explained the terms, his voice clear and precise. The trust, worth a significant sum, would be liquidated. A portion would be used to pay off all Daniel's outstanding personal debts, including his share of the credit card debt Rebecca had accrued. A further substantial sum would be given to him as a lump payment, a generous nest egg to start his life over. The remainder would be placed in a new protected trust for his future, managed by a neutral third party. "There is only one condition," Mr. Harrison said, his eyes locking with Daniel's. "All of this, your financial freedom, your fresh start, your future, is contingent on one single, non-negotiable action." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of the moment build. "You will receive these funds on the day that your divorce from Rebecca Stevens is officially finalized by the court." The silence was absolute. "If you choose not to accept these terms," Mr. Harrison concluded softly, "if you choose to remain married to Miss Stevens, the trust will be immediately and irrevocably dissolved, and the entirety of its contents will be donated to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The choice is yours. You can have your future, or you can have your wife. You cannot have both." Checkmate. I hadn't just won the game. I had rewritten the rules, taken control of the board, and handed my son the pen to write his own ending. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of radical, painful, and necessary love. It was the hardest and best thing I had ever done as a mother. The weight of that final condition, the stark binary choice, settled over the conference room like a physical presence. Rebecca, who had been shrinking under the weight of her exposed lies, suddenly found a last spark of defiance. She turned to Daniel, her eyes blazing with a desperate last-ditch effort at control. "Daniel,
Don't listen to them, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for him, though we could all hear it. She's trying to control you, to own you, just like she always has. We can fight this. We love each other. We can start over, just the two of us. We don't need her money. We have us. It was a bold, almost pathetic play, an appeal to a love that she herself had systematically poisoned and murdered. Daniel didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed on the document in front of him, the living will. He was seeing not just words on a page, but a crossroads. Two distinct paths lay before him, each leading to a drastically different future. One path, with Rebecca, was a dark, tangled thicket of lies, debt, and manipulation, leading to a place of certain ruin. The other path, the one his mother had cleared for him with painful precision, was a straight, open road, paved with financial freedom and the chance to reclaim his own soul. He slowly raised his head and looked at me. For the first time that morning, our eyes met across the long, polished table. I didn't offer a smile. I didn't offer a look of pity or of triumph. I simply held his gaze, my expression calm and steady. I was not telling him what to do. The document had already done that. I was simply bearing witness to his choice, the most important choice of his adult life. In his eyes, I saw a storm of emotions: shame, regret, a flicker of the old anger at being controlled that Rebecca had so expertly cultivated. But underneath it all, I saw something new, something I hadn't seen in a long time, a flicker of clarity. The fog of Rebecca's influence, of her gaslighting and her constant manipulation was finally beginning to lift. He was seeing her not as the dynamic, exciting woman who had swept him off the feet, but as the architect of his ruin. He saw the lies, the theft, the contempt she had for him and his family. He saw the woman who had stood by as his mother's wrist was broken and then used a non-existent child as a bargaining chip.
He turned his head slowly and looked at his wife. It was a look I had never seen from him before. There was no fear, no adoration, no confusion. There was only a quiet, profound emptiness. The love, or whatever he had called love, was gone, burned away by the harsh, clarifying light of the truth. "You lied about the baby," he said, his voice flat and dead. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an epitaph for their marriage. "Daniel, I did it for us," she began, her voice pleading as she reached for his hand on the table. He pulled his hand away as if her touch were acid. He stood up from the table. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if every limb weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked at Mr. Harrison. "Prepare the papers," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "The divorce papers." Rebecca let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "Daniel, no! You can't! I love you!" He ignored her completely, as if she were no longer in the room. He walked around the table and stood before me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, the full weight of his failure and his newfound freedom crashing down on him at once. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, a tear of grief for the man he should have been, for the marriage he thought he had. I stood up to face him. I didn't hug him. It was too soon for that. The wounds were too fresh, the chasm between us still too wide. I simply reached out my good hand and placed it on his arm. "Go home, Daniel," I said softly. "It's over." He nodded, a jerky, broken movement, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. Now only Rebecca was left. She sat alone at the vast table, a queen deposed, stripped of her power and her kingdom. She looked up at me, and the hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted, a terrifying thing to behold.
"You will regret this," she snarled, her voice low and trembling with rage. "No, Rebecca," I replied, my voice even and calm. "You will." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. "Mr. Stevens, I believe our business here is concluded. I would advise you to retain your own counsel regarding the upcoming divorce proceedings. My client will not be communicating with you further." She shot one last look of pure venom at me, then grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, leaving the scent of her expensive, cloying perfume in her wake. The door clicked shut, and the three of us, me, Carol, and Mr. Harrison, were left in the sudden, ringing silence of the aftermath. Carol came over and wrapped her arms around me. "You did it, Martha," she whispered in my ear. "You magnificent, brave woman, you did it." I leaned into her embrace, the strength I had maintained for weeks, for months, finally starting to crumble. I had won. I had saved my son, but the cost had been immense. I had been forced to declare war on my own family, to wield my love like a weapon, and even in victory, the battlefield is a lonely, sorrowful place. Mr. Harrison came over and patted my shoulder gently. "It was a necessary battle, Martha. You fought for your son's future. You gave him a chance to have one. Now it's up to him to live it." I knew he was right. I had cleared the path, removed the poison from his life. The rest of the journey was Daniel's to walk alone. The 6 months that followed the showdown in Mr. Harrison's office were a quiet, fragile time of rebuilding, like the first green shoots after a devastating forest fire. The divorce was swift and brutal on Rebecca's end. Stripped of all leverage and facing potential criminal charges, she tried to fight for alimony but was swiftly shut down by Mr. Harrison, who politely reminded her counsel of the documented theft and fraud. She ended up with nothing but her own debts and disappeared from our lives like a bad dream, reportedly moving to another state to start over. Daniel, true to his word, began the painful, arduous process of putting his life back together. He moved into a small, clean apartment across town, a space that was entirely his own. He started seeing a therapist twice a week, something he admitted he should have done years ago. He threw himself into his work, and his passion for teaching, which had been dulled under Rebecca's shadow, returned with a new vigor. The terms of the living will were executed flawlessly by Mr. Harrison. His debts were cleared, and he had the security of his inheritance to build upon, a foundation of stability he had never truly had. Our relationship was tentative. We were like two people learning to walk again after a terrible accident, unsure of our footing, afraid of causing more pain. We spoke on the phone once a week. The conversations were stilted at first, filled with unspoken words and the ghosts of past hurts. We didn't talk about Rebecca or the confrontation. We talked about the weather, his students, my physical therapy. We were carefully, cautiously building a new bridge over the chasm that had opened between us. There was no talk of the potential for custody battles over a non-existent child, no more financial drama, just quiet, careful progress. The real turning point, the moment I knew we were truly going to be okay, came on Easter Sunday. The sun was streaming through my dining room windows, illuminating the dust motes, dancing in the air like tiny, hopeful fairies. The house was filled with the familiar, comforting smells of baked ham, scalloped potatoes, and fresh flowers. It was the first holiday gathering I had hosted since the incident. Carol was there, of course, a permanent, beloved fixture in my life, and to my surprise and delight, Daniel had asked if he could bring Rachel. After the divorce, the two of them had tentatively connected, bonded by their shared experience of surviving Rebecca. Rachel, free from her sister's toxic influence, had blossomed. She had become a quiet, gentle friend to Daniel, and I was grateful for her presence, a symbol of how something good can emerge from the ashes of something terrible. The day was filled with a soft, gentle joy. We talked and laughed. Daniel seemed lighter than I had seen him in years. The haunted, fearful look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a calm self-assurance. He was still my son, but he was also becoming his own man, someone I was getting to know all over again. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, Daniel came up behind me in the kitchen. "Let me help with that, Mom," he said quietly. "It's all right, honey. You're a guest. I've got it." "No," he said, gently taking the stack of plates from my hand. "Let me." He set them down by the sink and turned to face me. The cheerful noise from the other room faded into the background, and it was just the two of us, standing in the heart of my home. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide, "I've been trying to find the right words for months. In therapy, on my own. I'm sorry feels so small. It's like trying to patch a dam with a Band-Aid." I just waited, my heart still, letting him find his way. "I wasn't just a bad husband. I was a terrible son. I failed you in every way a son can fail a mother. I was weak, and I was a coward. I let her hurt you, and I did nothing. I stood there and I chose silence because I was afraid of her, afraid of being alone. There is no excuse for that. None." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me for that, but I need to thank you. You didn't just save me from her or from debt. You saved me from myself. You showed me what strength and integrity look like. You fought for me when I wouldn't fight for myself. You gave me the most valuable inheritance of all, a second chance to be a good man." Tears were streaming down my face now, but they were not tears of pain or sorrow. They were tears of release, of a mother's love returned. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered, and this time when I reached for him, it felt right and true. I pulled him into a hug, my son, my boy, and he wrapped his arms around me, holding on as if he were drowning, his tears soaking the shoulder of my dress. "I forgive you," I said into his shoulder, my own voice choked with emotion. "Of course I forgive you. You're my son." We stood there for a long time, the silence in the kitchen no longer of betrayal, but of profound, absolute healing. Later that afternoon, as I watched him laughing with Carol and Rachel in the sun-drenched backyard, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I thought about the journey of the past year. I once believed that a mother's love meant endless, unconditional sacrifice, but I had learned a harder, truer lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to draw a line in the sand. Sometimes you have to be willing to burn down the life that is to make way for the life that should be. My life wasn't perfect,